Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, and today I wanted to talk about getting started Rhino for Windows or Rhino for Mac, actually Rhino for Mac today. Um, and we're going to talk about SubD. SubD's being the biggest feature for 7. There's a bunch of other stuff in there, but I think SubD is the banner carrier for 7. And I wanted to talk about how to make complex objects using very simple layout styles. And the goal here is to talk about how to break something down that may seem complicated on the surface, but if we think about it in terms of, you know, primary surfaces and secondary surfaces and big surfaces and blends and things like that, which is stuff we already know for NURBS, then SubD starts to lose a little bit of its mystery and become a little bit more accessible. So with this, I have a layer here set up where I've got some curves that represent the basic layout of a seed package. And so if we go to the front view, you can see the side view on this setup. And if we go to the right-hand view, you can see kind of a very basic right-hand view. And this just is set up to just be a guide to give us some idea of what we're actually trying to build. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use what I like to refer to as a paper doll technique, which is basically we're going to lay something out flat. We're going to connect it to some other things in order to capture some form, and then we're going to add a little bit of thickness. And none of those concepts are very complicated, and so I want to try and demystify anything, from a SubD point of view that might be confusing. So let's just go ahead and jump in here. And the first thing we're going to do is go to the SubD menu, and we're going to grab this single SubD face. And we're going to start just by clicking 4 points. And you can see that it drags out a shape. I'm going to hit enter to lock it in. And this is its smoothed form. And I don't want to work in smooth mode, so I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to go to what's referred to as box mode. And I'm going to do this in wireframe. And the idea here is I'm going to just lay out, think of these almost like post-it notes, right? Just little four-sided patches. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make a pile of those, and we're going to connect them. And the way that we're going to connect them is we're going to shift control click on an edge, and we're just going to grab this extrude dot, and we're just going to extrude a face up. And then we're going to shift control drag and grab that vertex, and we're going to stretch it out here. I'm going to do the same thing again. Just extrude, shift control drag, and we're just going to follow along and basically capture our shape. And the goal is to be, fairly perpendicular to your rails. If we think about this curve as one rail and this curve as another rail, we want our edges that go in this direction to be fairly perpendicular. We don't have to get crazy, but we want it to be slightly logical in the way that we set this out. Now, I can also drag this C-plane icon, but it doesn't extrude. If I just drag and let go, you can see that it moves it. What I actually want to do is I want to extrude that, but instead of extruding straight up and down, I want to extrude at an oblique angle. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to hold down the command key. And you'll see that dragging the command key actually allows me to extrude at an angle. And so I'm going to just kind of come out here, and I know I'm not quite hitting my shapes, but that's okay because we're going to adjust. So I'm going to pull this out like that, and then we're going to come back and just shift drag click or shift drag our vertexes here, and we're just going to lay this out very quickly. And so you can see with not a whole lot of effort, we have laid out the basics of our seed. Now, I want to back up a second and talk about something that I try to touch on in most of my videos when I'm talking about SubD, and that is rule of 3. And rule of three is it takes 3 points to make a corner, right? And we know this from NURBS. So if we're drawing a curve, we have to have, this is just an anchor point. This will be my corner, right? 1, 2, 3. And we look at the points and we can see that this is our, surface, so to speak. Think of this as the primary surface, and this is the primary surface, so to speak. This is the transition, okay, or our secondary surface. And if I grab these points and I move them closer together, look what happens. The corner tightens up. If I take these points and I move them farther apart, predictably, the corner gets softer. So this rule of three, these 3 points here, if we think about points and we go into 3 dimensions on a surface, those points also translate into the surface, right? And so if I grab this point, it's going to make a tighter surface, right? And if I move them farther apart, obviously it's going to be looser, right? All right, so I think we got that concept. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about SubD the exact same way. And so if I, for instance, draw a SubD cube, and obviously this is a 3-dimensional object, but we're only going to look at it at the end for right this second. If I pull this out and I switch this, let's just look at these two for the time being, and I switch this to smooth mode, you can see something kind of familiar happening, right? So let's turn the points on for this guy. Look at what we've got. We've got 3 points that make up the corner. And what happens if I move the points closer together? The exact same thing that happens if you move the points closer together on a curve. All right, so everything that we know about curves and surfaces applies to SubD. And we're going to use that knowledge and that rule of three, this concept of using 3 points, or in the case of a SubD surface, 3 edges, right? Each one of these points is related to an edge. This is related to that. This is related to that. Okay, so these edges make up the structure of the SubD object. And if we understand the relationship between the points and the edges and all that kind of stuff, we can start to say, okay, if we're going to do a curve and it looks like this, same rules apply. If I turn these points on, look what happens. 1, 2, 3. That makes up this part of the curve. In this case, 1, 2, 3. That makes up this part of the curve. In this case, 1, 2, 3. That makes up that part of the curve, and so on. And in this case, rule of three means that we're actually sharing a point. So this transition right here is sharing a point with this transition, actually sharing 2 points. And that's okay, as long as we understand it. So we know that if we need to come do in and out, we need points in order to be able to coincide with those in and outs. Same thing with SubD. So if I bring back my seat now, and I look at this, and I start to think about it, let's hide this for the time being. This has a slight bow out, a slight bow in, and a slight bow out like that. So that means I'm going to need at least 1, 2, 3 points in order to make up this curve, right? If I were to do this in NURBS, it would look like this, right? Roughly. Obviously, I would adjust that a little bit, but those are the 3 points that make up that. Same thing here, 1, 2, 3. I'd need 3 points to make up that as well. Now, I can share this point with another curve as long as, because it's the same thing as when we did this, right? I can share those points. So if we look at our SubD, I've got 1, 2, 3. That gives me the ability to add crown here, right? It also allows me to add crown back here either positive or negative. I can pull it this way or this way. So that's okay. I'm going to go with that. Now I've got 1, 2, 3 here, which then allows me to be able to adjust this shape, right? I can pull it out, I can stick it in. And I've also got a little bit of negative crown back here, which means I need that third point here as well. So far we're making sense. We've got 1, 2, 3, we've got crown there, 1, 2, 3, we've got crown there. Now the curve inverts. See that? It goes inside, so 1, 2, 3. That makes up this inversion right here. And that allows me to be able to adjust it. I can go in or out, anything like that. So I've got enough points to kind of do what I want to do. And then there's a slight return with a very slight crown in the last section of this curve, which I can then adjust with these 3 points. So we've laid out enough patches in order to be able to do, or enough edges in order to be able to do what we want to do. And if I hit the tab key and I switch to smooth mode, you can see that we're very close to where we wanted to be. And I can make some little subtle adjustments in here and get a little bit closer. And I like to use the concept of modeling in box mode, which is this, right, the boxing mode, and adjusting in smooth mode. And I'll show you why once we get down the road a little bit, why that's important. So we've got essentially our first paper doll, so to speak, right? This is a flat object, nothing complicated here. Everything about that makes sense. So if we go to the perspective view, I'm going to take this object, and I'm just going to use gumball and slide it over. I'm going to use O-snap actually and snap it to my curve. And then I'm going to go to the right-hand view. And you can see, oops, you can see that it's just in a straight line right now. And one of the cool things about SubDs is you can use UDTs on it, so the deformation tools. So I'm going to grab this thing, and I'm going to use a bend deformer, and I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to bend this. Look how beautiful that is. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to start here. I'm going to bend it this way. We just took our SubD and we deformed it using the procedural tools of the UDTs, right? If you don't know what I mean when I say UDT, if we go to the standard, let's see, where are they living? I never use the menus. I always just type it. It is, oh, I'll find it in here somewhere. But it's basically the bend, twist, cage edit, flow along surface, those kind of things. Those are the universal deformation tools. But the bend is really, really useful for SubD stuff. Now, if I look at this from the top view, you can see that this is just straight forward back. And that's not necessarily what we want because a seat flares a little bit from the front to the back. So I'm going to grab these edges and then double click the ones in the center. And I'm just going to slide this edge out a little bit. Again, nothing hard yet, right? We haven't done anything difficult. And you can see that I'm already starting to get that kind of taper. Now that we have this, we just simply mirror it. And we're going to mirror it at 0. And we've got the wings or the side bolsters of our seat, right? Again, nothing hard yet. Click these edges, double click the ones in the center, and then I'm going to run the bridge command. And bridge, you can think about like blend surface. Okay, if we're making a comparison to like a NURBS paradigm, bridge is essentially the surface that connects two things together. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and run that. And I used 2 segments because I wanted a center segment, because the back has a little bit of crown to it, and I can't get any crown unless I have what? 1, 2, 3. Because I've got a center section, I can grab this, double click that edge, shift control double click by the way, and I can just grab gumball and I can just pull this back and I can add a little bit of crown to that. So we basically started with a flat object, we modified it a little bit very simply, we connected it using bridge, And then we just did some very simple transformations in order to get the basics of our seat. Now look what happens if I hit the tab key. We go to smooth mode, and we've got this really beautiful organic part. Super easy. It gets even better. We want to add the cushions and stuff to it. Well, that seems like a complicated thing, right? It isn't. If we just go to SubD, offset SubD, see how the arrows are pointing backwards? I don't want that, so I'm going to just hit F enter, which is the flip. And then I'm going to use about 0.75 of a unit in order to get the thickness that I'm looking for. And boom, we've got the basics of our seat. It's not very pretty yet, so let's get into that. Shift Command, double click this edge to get the entire edge. And then I'm going to go back to my SubD menu, and I'm going to just take that crease away. Remove that crease, and look what happens. We've got, really quickly, we've got something that kind of starts to look like a seat, right? This could be an office chair, it could be a fancy dining room chair or something. It could be a nerdy gaming chair or something like that, or it could be a car seat. Let's call it a car seat for now. Now, this edge, I don't like how sharp this edge is. I get it, that's kind of like this is the back shell and this is the upholstery, but I want this transition to be a little softer. So I'm going to double click this edge. I'm going to go to box mode, and I'm going to use a bevel. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bevel this edge and add, what it does is it adds 2 more edge loops outside of the edge loop that we had. I'm going to uncrease those because now this is my 3. See, 1, 2, 3. And what happens if I get 3 points close together? I get a sharp corner or a sharper corner without it being like cut yourself sharp, right? So now if I go to smooth mode, you can see that that definition is there, that sharpness in that edge is there, but it doesn't have that same kind of gross, sharp, cut yourself kind of feel. So that's basically the back of our seat right there. So let's do the same thing. Let's go back to box mode, and I'm going to go back into wireframe. Let's hide this for the time being. We don't need it for now. And let's do the same thing with the seat bottom. And in this case, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to draw a curve, and I'm going to use that to extrude. But I am going to click this SubD friendly. If I click SubD friendly, that means that that curve is now able to be extruded into a SubD, whereas if it's not SubD friendly, it won't. So if I click this, each point I pick is going to be an edge. And so if I think about this, right, I need 1, 2, 3 to make that transition. I'm going to count this as 1. Here's 2, and there's 3 to make this transition. I'm going to count this as 1. Actually, I could even count that as 1, 2. My third one could be here, and then my last one could be out here. Now, if I look at my points, they're organized more or less in a way that makes sense. And if I grab this and extrude it, it should extrude into a SubD. And in this case, it does. If we look down here, it says 1 open SubD added to the selection. Now, if I didn't make that curve SubD friendly, what happens? It extrudes into a surface. So it's a surface. So that SubD friendly checkbox is important if you want to work in SubD. And this is just a way to kind of get there faster. I'm going to delete this curve for now because I don't need it. And then I'm going to just Shift Control click and then double click the center. I'm going to scale to 0, which is going to flatten that guy out and just drag that down. So that's just a little quicker way of laying out the surfaces the way that we wanted to do it. And if I hit the tab key, you can see that it smooths out nicely. Now, the reason that my corners are sharp on here is because when I did that extrusion, it actually creased these corners. So if I were to take this entire thing and uncrease it, you'll see that it looks gotta go to the right menu, that it looks more like you would expect it to look, right? So if I crease a corner, it sharpens up. But in this case, I don't really need that. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it as it sits. I'm gonna do just a little bit of editing here. And then you notice something's going on here, right? See how my original curve has some crown in it, but I don't have a center point. I don't have any way of adding that crown. So I'm gonna click and double click these edges, and I'm just gonna drag up an additional edge. And it doesn't really matter where you place it because you can always shift drag either edges or points and adjust it so that it flows a little more nicely. And now look, I've got the ability to add that crown because I have what? Say it with me. 1, 2, 3 points. Not 10. I don't need 10. I just need 3. That's all it takes. Rule of 3. That's why it's rule of 3 and not rule of 16. Okay, I've got a little crown back here. I'm going to just go ahead and add that. And then I'll go to my perspective view, and this is our paper doll, right? Dead flat. Nothing complicated, super easy. Everything about this we understand. Makes sense, right? Now, this edge isn't really buying me anything. Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. If I delete this edge and go to smooth mode, I can see that this edge gives me a little bit of sharpness in that corner, so actually maybe I'll leave it. And then we'll do our final adjustments in smooth mode again, box mode for modeling, smooth mode for adjusting. And we can argue about the semantics behind modeling and adjusting, but just bear with me. So let's go back to smooth or box mode, hit the tab key, and then I'm going to just drag this over, and again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to snap this using O snap. And if your gumball doesn't snap, by the way, go to the gumball settings and change them to be snappy dragging. There's smooth dragging and snappy dragging. Set it to snappy dragging. There's the little menu ball right here. If you click that, that gives you the option. So set it to snappy dragging, and then that way it'll respect those snaps, your gumball. You'll be able to use it with those snaps. Now, again, this is dead flat, but this object isn't dead flat. If you go to the right-hand view. So what are we going to do? We're going to just bend it. And because we've got that center section, we can do this. If we didn't, it would just be a straight line that rotated, right? We don't want that. We want it to bend so it has that nice shape. And look, we've got this nice crowned part. Now, the seat may have a little bit of shape to it, so maybe what I do is I pull these guys and I make this part a little narrower. And maybe I make this part a little wider so that it fits better with the bolsters. And then we're just going to mirror it, just like we did before. Simple so far. I'm going to just click, double click all of these edges, and I'm going to bridge. I'm going to use the same setting I did before. I'm going to use 2, that way I get a center line. And that's useful for not only for symmetry, but it also gives you the ability to be able to add crown, which I'm going to want to do. So I'm going to just double click this. I'm going to just scale it. Look at that. I get crown front and back, which is kind of what I was looking for. We go to shaded mode so you can see what's going on. You can see that we've got the basis of our seat pan. We're going to do the same thing, SubD offset. I'm going to use the same units. I'm going to flip so it goes in the right direction, hit enter, and there's my seat. Now, the offset got a little tortured here. You can see that in box mode. This is the reason I say model in box mode, adjust in smooth. In smooth mode, everything looks fine, right? Except this corner tends to be a little tight, which is okay. Maybe that's what we want. So let's go down the road a little bit and see what happens. I'm going to double click this edge and remove that crease so that we get our soft inside. And look what's happening. See how this is folding over itself back here? That I definitely don't want. But how do I fix that? It doesn't look like there's any easy way to fix that in smooth mode. Well, that's why I say model in box mode, because in box mode, look at a wireframe, it's super easy to see what's going on. Look at that. You can see where that's crossing up. So this edge right here, this one, not that whole thing, this one, is basically crossing over itself, and we want to fix that. I'm going to just use scale because it works symmetrically. I'm going to pull this inside that, see how that unties. And then I'm going to use scale 1 from here to the back. I'm going to just pull this out and untie that. And it looks like I've got a few things that are still tied up, so I'm going to just grab this edge and this edge. I'm just going to scale those in, untie those. See how easy that is to track now in box mode? So now we can see that this entire edge, right, is now untied. And if we switch back to smooth mode, you can see that that now is no longer crossing over itself. It's still tight because those edges are close together, but it's not crossing over itself like it was before. We can also control the softness by possibly, maybe we delete this edge and see how that gets really soft. I don't like that, so I'm going to put it back. But maybe this one. Maybe just this edge from here to here. Maybe that seat crease is too deep, so I'm just going to delete that. And see how that softened up everything, but because we didn't delete it all the way around, we still maintain the definition out here. That's one of the nice things about SubDs is it's really, really flexible. Maybe this is still too soft or still too sharp. I can delete that and soften that out. See how that just goes away and gets really nice and soft. So that's the basis of our seat pan, but we've got this sharp edge again, like we did on the top, right? It's like you can cut yourself on it. We don't like that. So let's shift double click. Let's go to box mode because it's easier to work in box mode than it is in smooth mode for this kind of stuff, and we'll work in wireframe. And let's add a bevel to it. And we're just going to add a bevel right in there. Again, this is our 3, 1, 2, 3. So those are the 3 points that control this transition. And they're close together, so it's going to be sharp-ish, right? But it's not going to be, I'm removing the crease from the outside ones because they were there before. And let's go to shaded mode. And now we've got that definition without that laser beam cut yourself sharpness on it. Now this might still be too sharp. So what I can do is I can actually double click this entire edge and I can run the slide command. And I can actually slide this edge farther away. Do the same thing here. Grab this entire thing. And slide this one farther away. And then that is going to soften up, right? Because we moved them farther apart. If it's still too sharp, I can just get rid of the center line. And now my 3 is controlled 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So those edges now share a point with the stuff around it, and it makes it softer. I do like that definition, so I'm actually going to leave it there. And let's bring back the other part and see how they relate together now. Now, I think if I look at this from the top view, I think the seat bottom needs to match the width of the seat top. So I'm just going to scale that out. I can even use gumball, snap it. And then I might want to add a little bit of crown here. That looks all right. Those relate together. Those look all nice together. These 2 points, I might want to scale those out just a little bit. And I use scale because it works symmetrically. And I may want to scale these 2 points out as well, just to make my shapes flow a little bit better together. I like that a little better. And I've got a little kind of softening back here where your butt would go, and then a little bit sharpening where your where the seat bolsters would be. We got the basis of our seat, and we can do things like add a headrest just by grabbing some faces and using the extrude. We can add a headrest in there. And we can adjust the shape just by pulling points. Make that a little less tortured. Maybe we don't like this edge. I'm going to just pull it out, get rid of it, see how that softens that back. I may even get rid of this. I'm going to iterate on that and see. Ooh, don't like that, so I'm going to put it back. But I may pull these two edges back a little farther just to change how that highlight happens. We've got a really nice transition going on, but I don't like the shape from the front, so I'm going to grab these two and scale them in. Just going to tighten that up a little bit. And then maybe raise the entire thing just by dragging. And we end up with a very complex shape that was very easy to make in about 30 minutes. Now, what can we do with this? The cool things, some of the cool things that we can do now that we've got our basis, right, is we can take this and copy it, drag, tap option, and we can start iterating and say, okay, well, what do we want to do with this? What do we want to, maybe this has got some seat bolsters or something that we want to play with. So I'm going to grab every other face. And the reason I'm going to grab every other face is I want these to extrude up individually. So I'm just going to grab that extrude dot and pull up. And look what happens. It makes seat bolsters. Now, if I had grabbed all of these, right, this is why I grabbed every other one, it makes one seat bolster. I didn't want that. I wanted individual ones. So I'm going to pull these up individually. And then I'm going to go back and grab the ones I didn't pull up. And I'm going to pull those up as a second operation. And you can see that I get seat upholstery. There are little bolsters in there. And I can adjust these depending on where I move the edges or whether I move these edges closer together. That'll determine how tight that seam gets. Right? If I want this seam to be a little sharper, I can pull this over like that. See how that sharpens up. But again, it's just 3 points, right? 1, 2, 3. No difference. 1, 2, 3. There's your 3 points. It just depends on how they relate to each other. If we go to box mode, you can see kind of what's going on here. Right? And we can adjust these, like say we wanted these to be equal height. I can just pull this up, pull it apart a little bit, go back to smooth mode, and that adjusts a little bit more like that. Okay, so maybe that's one iteration, and we might want to do the same thing over here so that we mimic that styling. And we'll just pull these out, and then we'll do the same thing here. And that gets that type of seat. Maybe over here we want to do something different. Maybe we want to have seatbelt holes or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a couple more edges in here. So I'm going to add an edge. I'm going to use both sides so that I get symmetrical pieces. And you can see that that sharpened up the headrest a little bit, but it also gave us an opportunity where I can do things like this, where I can grab this face and this face, and I can bridge them together. It might not let me do it because they don't have the same number of points. That's right. So let's bridge this one and this one. So now That's the first face. That's the second face. First phase, there we go. Got to read the command line. There we go. Have to follow the directions. So that allows me to be able to bridge a hole through this thing. And I'm only going to use one segment. If I needed to add crown to the center, actually I'll use two. And that allows me to be able to add crown because I can grab this thing and I can either scale it in or out. And that allows me to adjust the shape from the front to the back. But then I can pull these points around and change the shape of this like that. And if I like that, let's say that's good. I mean, it can always be better, let's be honest, but I got an hour, so, go easy on me. But let's say I like this, so I want to copy it over to the other side. Well, then I can just do a reflect. And I'm going to grab the reflect icon here. I'm going to pick this guy. I'm going to use the center point, and then I'm going to click this side, and it's going to give me the wrong side. Let's do it again. Yeah, got to pick the right side. All right, that's the side I want. There we go. So now I've got a reflected object, and this actually, you can see, has a dark side and a light side. The nice thing about this is now I can work symmetrically. And so if I pick an edge or some faces over here and I start dragging, now it works symmetrically. So it depends on where in your design process you need to start, iterating and doing stuff symmetrically as to when you put the reflect on. And then if you want to get rid of the reflect, you just simply right click on this and we remove the symmetry and it goes away. And so now I'm back to having just a single sided object. But reflect is really nice if you're doing things. I usually only reflect because I try to iterate and see if I like something. So maybe I'll do one side, let's say if I go back, maybe I'll do one side like that, and I'll say, okay, this edge is going to come way down in here like this, and this thing is going to come way over like that. And maybe that's one shape. And then maybe over here, I'm going to do a different one. If I bridge this, gotta read the directions. First edge, enter. Second edge, enter. There we go. And so maybe this side, I want this shape to be, not like that. Something a little less horrible than that. Maybe I want it to be something like that. And then I can iterate and say, well, which side do I like better? Well, I clearly like this side better. So then when I reflect, I can pick the object, I can start at the center point, and then I can pick this side. If I pick the right side, that side. There we go. And then that way I can keep the side that I like. So that's the one nice thing about reflect, is it allows you to go in at a later date and add symmetry to something. And it allows you, especially if you're doing a symmetrical object, it allows you to be able to iterate on both halves and then see which half you like and then pick which one to keep. When I first started using reflect, I was like, it doesn't work the way I'm used to having it work. I don't like that. And the more I started using it, the more I realized that it actually is kind of awesome, because it does let you do that iteration. And if we do something like this, oh, come now. There we go. I'm used to the Windows one where it allows you to pre-pick. I will be writing that up as a bug. Mac side doesn't let you do it. So we can do things like this and create some pretty cool shapes, right? And so here we are at 39 minutes, and we've got two variations of a C that we could throw to a printer, we could throw to a clay CNC, we could, and get something very, very quick to see how it fits, how it feels, where we need to adjust. And then we can come back into the model after we see our physical part, and we can start making adjustments to decide, well, maybe we don't like this bolster up here. So we pull it out. Right? And we get rid of it. Say that one was too high. And then we knit the edges back together. We delete these edges. Super versatile. You can just kind of add and remove stuff at will. Maybe this one needs to soften, so I'm going to delete that and see how that just softens out. So now we've got a different seat, so we can test that one and see how it looks. So there's the flexibility and the ease of which you can pull this stuff together is really kind of refreshing, because trying to model something like this in NURBS would make you crazy, right? It would take forever. And so I don't usually do this in my demos, but just for the sake of time, I wanted to focus a little bit more on the basics and how you think about this stuff. But I do have a little bit of a Julia Childs reveal here. And so let's take these guys, and I'm going to set a new layer for these. And this is just call that demo, and remove these down here. And I'm going to just hide these guys. And then this is basically, let's go to the SubD version of this. There it is. This is, basically that exact same technique, right? You can even see the paper doll that I laid out for the bottom here. And I've added a couple of edges and things like that in order to be able to get some shape back here. But again, it follows rule of three, right? 1, 2, 3. That's the transition for this edge right here. Right? These three. That's the 3 edges that make up this transition. And then same thing here. 1, 2, 3. That makes up this little dent down. 1, 2, 3. These make up the little bulge, right? That gives us our little S curve that we talked about. Remember from when we were talking about the NURBS curve? So there's nothing complicated here. I did pull a few edges out in order to be able to soften a few things, and I did bridge through here and then add some edges in order to get some seams and things like that. But if you look at this, it basically follows the exact same rules that we did before. And if we take this and then come up and look at this thing all finished up, and we look at it in rendered mode. I'm running on a really ancient Mac, by the way, so my video card, you might hear my video card screaming over the microphone. I'm working on like a 6-year-old Mac. But with some materials that I downloaded from Substance, some physically based materials, and a little bit of splitting and things like that, I converted this seat to NURBS and then did some NURBS modeling on it down here in order to be able to add the details, right? So this little panel down here is a recess that I just built in NURBS. I think I had about maybe 45 minutes to an hour into this particular seat, but the results are really pretty convincing. And this is something that we could render out for a presentation. It's something that we could throw through a printer if we wanted to print it. It's pretty much ready to go at this point. Obviously, you could render it up and develop any kind of images or anything that you wanted over that. So what I'm trying to show you is how simply something like this starts, and it all starts basically from that flat layout, that flat kind of paper doll, and understanding rule of three. If you understand rule of three and you understand how to lay something out, flat, like you cut it out of paper with scissors, you can pretty much make anything that you want to make. The only other tools that were used in this is bridge, and I used bridge in order to connect the hole in here, in order to make that hole. And then I converted it to NURBS using the toNURBS command. And then once it was in NURBS, I just used regular NURBS modeling tools. I used the split command. I used I drew a shape and I booleaned it out of the side. These are just modeled normally. This is a little revolve. And then I threw some materials on it. I've got a little emboss up here. And in about, I would say, if I'm being completely honest, everybody lies how fast they do stuff. If I'm being completely honest, I probably have probably just over an hour into this. The first version I did of it is on the forum actually, and it's called 30-Minute Car Seat. And that one I did actually put a timer on it, and I did actually knock that one off in under 30 minutes, but it's not quite as detailed as this guy is. This was another attempt to just kind of get this workflow down, and so this entire seat was probably about an hour, maybe an hour and 5 minutes, something like that, to the point where I was able to get renderings out of it. But you can see that like there's nothing hard here. And so I hope that what this does is it demystifies the process a little bit and allows you to be able to start looking at this in a way that say, oh, okay, well, if I need it to bulge up, I need 3 edges. If I need it to bulge down, I need 3 edges. If I need it to S-curve, I need maybe 4 or 5 edges, depending on how the shape of the curve is, because I can steal this edge for this transition and this edge for that transition, and start to put together a plan on how to do this. The goal with SubD is not to make it hard. Don't add too much stuff. You don't need 10 points to make a curve, right? The exact same way, if we go to wireframe, the exact same way that we don't make curves like this, at least you better not be making curves like this, okay? We don't make curves like that. That's the exact same reason why we don't make SubDs that have 10,000 edges. In fact, there's an exercise that I want you to go through as you're making SubD parts. See how much stuff you can take out. See how many edges you can delete before the shape falls apart. If the shape falls apart, then you can obviously add more stuff. You can always put it back. You can always add an edge. You can always bevel an edge. You can always do that kind of stuff. But keep reducing. You know, there's a phrase that's used in race car building all the time called simplify then add lightness. It's the same thing applies to SubD. Simplify and add lightness to your models. Like remove as much stuff as you can before it falls apart, and then go forward. And as you go forward, keep testing yourself. Do I need that edge? Can I take it out? Can I remove it? And try it. Just double click the edge and delete it. See what happens to your shape. Can you pull the other edges more and get the shape back, or do you actually need that edge? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you actually need the edge, and that's fine. You know, put the stuff in there you need, but don't put 10 things in there. You know, you don't need this. All you need is that. Okay? We can get the same shape. We just have to make the points that we use work harder. All right? Any questions on that? Hit the chat and let me know if you've got any questions. If not, I think what I'm going to do is call it and let you go. But hopefully the ideas have come across, and the whole idea of being able to simplify something in order to get the shapes you want and not add unnecessary complexity have come through. And with a little bit of practice and a little bit of skill, you can get something that looks super complicated, but actually at the end of the day is really pretty simple. So this seat right here, all rendered up after I converted it to nerves, is the exact same seat as this one, which is the SubD version of it before I converted to nerves and split it up. There's not a million faces in here. Simple, simple, simple. All right, any questions at all? Feel free to hit the chat if you have a question. If not, we'll call it and I'll let you go. All righty, everybody's good. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it when we get an audience. I think that always makes the presentation a little better. I'm gonna this session is being recorded, and the recording will be on our YouTube page, which is here. I'm gonna throw that in the chat for you. If you haven't checked out our YouTube page, please do so. It's where we keep all of this stuff archived. It allows you to be able to see what we're working on. I just did this demo yesterday for Windows, the scissors one. And there's a bunch of other SubD stuff in here if you want to get more familiar with SubD. One of the ones that I would start with, there's one in here. If we go to the videos and we roll down here, a really good one to get started with, which also talks about paper doll. It's down here ways. This one is good. This getting started chair for Mac is really good. Again, complex part with very simple layout and setup. But this Rhino 7 SubD hand challenge, this is a really good one to start with if you want to get really comfortable with paper doll, because it talks about, basically how to build a really complex shape with very simple layout. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions, I will let you go. Thank you very much for coming. My name's Kyle Houchins. I'm a technical trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Mac. Go make great stuff. We'll catch up with you next time. Thanks.